You're listening to ArTEEtude, a podcast with artists created and produced by Detlef Schlich, a visual artist and ritual designer, living and loving in West Cork, and best known for his essay about the cause and effect of shamanism, art and digital culture. Working in the field of performance, photography, painting, sound, installations, and film, he will dive and discover with us and a weekly creative guest into the unknown and exciting deep ocean of the creative mind.
This is Detlef Schlich, and today we dive into the exciting deep ocean of the creative mind with Declan Jones. Hi, Declan.
Hello, Detlef. Good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, or good morning. It's in Ireland. It's funny. They say already good afternoon if it's 2 o'clock.
That's right. Yeah. Well, midday in Ireland at the moment is really 13:20 because we're in summertime, and where we are is 20 minutes from London geographically.
All right.
So midday in Ireland in the summer is not 12 o'clock, but it's 1300 hours, 20 minutes.
So that means 1 hour and 20 minutes apart.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So is that the reason why the Irish say already at 11 o'clock in the morning, good night?
Yeah. Any time of the day is good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I really, as I came over here and they said, oh, a beautiful afternoon, and I thought something was wrong with me. You know, watching on the clock and say, hey, it's 1 o'clock.
Yeah, because if you're putting suntan lotion on, people think 12 o'clock, you got to do it, it's midday, but really they're an hour and 20 minutes early.
Yeah, and if I say that at 11 o'clock, good morning, for instance, in Dublin, they thought I'm crazy,
The day is over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, go home to Germany.
Yeah. Well, I suppose in summer in Ireland, the morning starts so early, maybe 4 o'clock, maybe a little earlier, and then the evening it doesn't get dark, and then in June it hardly gets dark at all.
And what I've learned here in my life in Dublin is that you deal mostly with farmers. And farmers getting up very early in the morning. That means 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, getting the kettle, then So that's probably as well the reason why they say, what a beautiful afternoon if it's 1 o'clock or something.
Yeah,
You lost your track time-wise.
Yeah. Well, it's nice not to be guided by the clock, but by the weather and by what you do yourself.
Which is very natural, isn't it?
I think so. I think it lends to the creativity, because some people say, I can do nothing except at night.
Yeah.
But night doesn't matter. It's when you're ready to do it and when you're ready to apply yourself.
And that's Da Vinci made it. I mean, I think he slept 3 hours and then he was working again and then he slept, And I think if that works, it's good, isn't it?
Well, it is, because we forget, like in the west of Ireland here, and I think I was talking to you before about it, in the sense, we forget that the monks, the ancient monks, drifted towards the west of Ireland and islands off the west of Ireland because it was the last frontier of Europe, the known world. And for them, when you went out to sea, you could fall off the sea because their belief was the world was flat.
Like it looks at the beacon.
Yes.
And not close to Baltimore, the Baltimore beacon. But this beacon was built by the Irish because the English wanted to build them, So I've researched a little bit about that. So that wasn't the monks, but the monks did other good things. They brew. They used to be the first, actually chemists, and they brew the beer.
Yes, for medicinal purposes.
Was it medicinal?
Yes, and even today, Irish whiskey, it's for a medicinal purpose. When you have a cold, you take to the bed with a bottle of Irish whiskey and some hot water,
Especially if the baby is crying, give him a paddies.
This happened to me. I only found out maybe 20 years ago, before my mother died, that because I was a child who wouldn't sleep, she used to add a spoonful of whiskey to my bottle, and that would send me to sleep.
It was very common here.
Yeah.
Or still is probably.
Probably,
on rural side, I think so. That's right. All right. So, why Declan is part of our show, and why we dive today together with Declan into the unexpected ocean of the creative mind is Declan wrote a book. Wrote a book about a priest, and it is half the way autobiographical, I suppose, because Detlef used to be a priest, but is not a priest anymore because he couldn't deal with his conscience somehow to be still in this job. Is that true? I mean, is this right?
Well, yeah, I was ordained a priest. I actually haven't formally left I actually formally haven't left the priesthood. But I don't practice, obviously.
Yeah.
But yes, I think two things. I think there's a big difference, and people don't often think or maybe understand it. The difference between belief and faith.
Yeah.
And also the book I wrote, it was based in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Which it was published in 2014.
Okay.
But
when did you write it?
I wrote it 2011 to 2013, and then it was published in 2014.
But you probably put as well not just your autobiography into it. You put a little bit of research. I mean, it took probably a couple of years to
yes. Well, what I was interested in is that.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to
Ireland
the show.
Today is a liberal democracy and a very open, wide economy.
Yeah.
Back in the 1970s, the late 60s, the early 1970s, and on through that decade, Ireland, I believe, was in the last throes of being what do they call it? A theocracy. Mm-hmm. A theocracy is something like Iran is today. Mm-hmm. It is the religious belief that guides the political philosophy. Yeah. And very much back from the foundation of the Irish state in 1922 to the early 70s, Irish politicians, the Irish government, always deferred to the Catholic Church and its authority on how it should rule the Irish people.
Yes, the church and state was one unit.
More or less. I mean, it wasn't formally, but certainly if the church disagreed with any policy or laws that the government were going to introduce...
They couldn't get further with it.
Yes, they could insist that the government change this. And the government always did. It always deferred...
Which is very dangerous.
Well, it is, because, again, it brings in this notion of faith and belief, because, in a sense, to have faith in something is irrational, because we don't fully understand it's to have faith, but to believe in something is you have something, it's a rational thing.
Which is already given without questioning it.
The faith is, yes, but to believe...
the belief, I think, is like the Ten
the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Yes, but the one behind it is the God who gave the commandments. You can't prove that God exists.
No.
So therefore, it's not rational. It's in your mind.
That's what I mean.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
I'm always arguing with. My last chat was a girl. She's Mormon, and she was very devastated as well because of this belief system, And she has as well a podcast. And I wrote her. I say, look, it's great. How are you gonna deal with situations? I think really that we need more exploring the spirituality instead the believing,
Yes, well, in a sense, yes. I think the believing has to be explored and has to be challenged.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
Yes. So I think whether one, like for me now at the moment, my belief is that there is something there which we all call God in a sense, but not a God that we have in our heads. But whether you're a Mormon or whether you're a Catholic or whether you're Shinto or whether you believe in Muhammad or whether you believe in any of the Indian religions, I believe that's cultural.
Sure.
That there is just one real presence, that wherever you're born, you were indoctrinated or inculturated into a particular belief that your ancestors have, that your community has, that your family has.
Absolutely.
And it's only in this world today that where we travel quite a lot, we can see the
ideas swapping over into another society, and all of a sudden something new creates as well.
And also what people do, like, I mean, in Western Europe, Christians light candles to remind themselves of God or to pray. The same happens in India with their gods, or in China, or in Japan. You know that people sometimes have very similar, not only similar beliefs, but that they have similar rituals where they
because they belong to a species called human, isn't it?
Yes, and they believe in a transcendent, whatever name they put on that transcendent.
And there's probably as well a collective consciousness. I mean,
very much so.
If we came, for instance, from we're not coming from the, what's the starch, the word, I forgot the name.
The stork.
Yeah. So if we don't come from the stork, we come rather from the stardust than from the stork, probably.
Yeah. But I think any of us who are, touched by the transcendent and spiritual, we would be very good Jews if we were born in Israel. We would be very good Muslims if we were born in Saudi Arabia. We would be very good Catholics if we were born in Ireland. We would be very good wherever we're born, because it's that sort of notion that we're touched by this faith, belief.
This thought. I mean, this sort of manipulated thoughts due to the habitats, due to the place where we grow up, and I think it's difficult to break out of this if you're surrounded by believers.
I think so, and I've seen this around.
Brainwash, for instance.
And we're all, even unless we're put up to it, unless we're challenged or faced to it, we don't really believe that. Like, in Ireland, when I was growing up as a young person, as a teenager, there was the war in the north of Ireland, and it was seen to be a religious war between Catholics and Protestants. It was seen to be a political war between people who were there from the time of a plantation by the English and people who were there, indigenous, native Irish, who didn't like the plantation. And then if you go to somewhere like Rwanda, it's ethnic. It's Tutsis and Hutus.
Absolutely. I mean, that was awful, wasn't it?
Yes, and I happened to be there at that during that time.
We come later today. If we can make that today, because I think your job as a priest already takes I think some time on board. It's quite interesting, and as well I think the listeners, they are really they appreciated to come across with a quasi priest or with an ex priest. I mean, but you say you still.
Well, in the Catholic Church, when you're ordained a priest, you're a priest forever.
Are you?
And you can apply to become laicized, which means you don't be a cleric but a lay person, an ordinary member of the church. But I've never applied for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, as if you do something wrong as a priest, the church would throw you out of the priesthood. But they haven't done that either to me. So they may do after this podcast. I may have the Vatican on my head, but sure, we'll deal with that if it happens.
Yeah, so let's try how we can achieve this. That's great. I was wondering, so as you studied to become a priest, what did you study, and who was responsible for studying your? When did you study? In the 70s, you say, as well?
Yeah, 70s and 80s. Yeah.
How long did it take?
It takes around 8 or 9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
To become a priest.
Yeah, well, I was a Franciscan,
Yeah.
which is priests who in Ireland don't normally work in parishes.
Yeah.
But they stay in convents or friaries.
Yeah.
And it is there that the people come to talk with them, and they act as quasi-counselors or religious services or talk about their problems. Or in the olden days, back in the 70s and 80s and maybe very early 90s, people would come for confession.
Yeah.
Where they would say that they had sinned and would ask forgiveness for those sins, which is very much something like Muslims today on the Hajj, going to Mecca to ask forgiveness for their sins. It's part and parcel, I think, of many religions.
Yeah.
But for the Catholic Church, this is the way it was done.
Yeah, I know. I think in Germany it was often the case that people, if they were paid money, that they to the church. As well, yeah. I don't know. So if you ever came across that people said, here, I give you 100. What was it in the 70s in Ireland?
Pounds.
So I did that, and then that. Can you give me the absolutation? How are you gonna call that?
Yeah. The only thing I don't myself ever remember being given money to as a gift to forgive people their sins.
Yeah.
But what did happen in Ireland was that if you wanted your name mentioned at the Eucharist, at a celebration of the Mass, then you paid the priest so much money so that you would get, say, your dead relatives or maybe somebody who was undergoing an illness mentioned during the Mass. And this was supposed to mean that these people received special graces by being mentioned by the priest.
And they all of a sudden became in the hierarchy of good people in the community a higher standard, a higher level, don't they?
Yeah. That practice came from a medieval practice where it was believed that the priest who celebrated the Eucharist, the Mass, on the altar, received 100% grace. And the further you were from the priest, the less grace you got.
God.
So it actually continued into the 20th century, into the late 20th century. I still think there is some of it today. So if I mention, if I'm the priest, and I mention the name of someone, that means that they get more grace than the person who has attended the Mass. And they're at the back of the church because they're further away from me.
Far too far. To remember.
And all of this theology, we'll call it, or practice, it lost meaning. And it just continued as an unquestioned practice. And I think, unfortunately for the Catholic Church, a lot of these medieval practices became identified with what people believed in, and these were their beliefs. It really didn't talk about God, but it talked about the saints, or making your rosary, or doing your devotions, and all of these things.
So as enlightenment wouldn't exist.
No. It's really only the Enlightenment coming with the open economy in Ireland in late 50s, with free education being introduced in the 1960s. And then with the economy, the Irish economy becoming very open. It was a very closed economy up to 1960. That the Enlightenment gradually penetrated. And of course, then we see after the year 2000, homosexuality it was decriminalised. People could use contraceptives. It was okay. The Irish recently voted a couple of years ago as a people that there could be gay marriage.
That sounds very interesting. I would like to get into that in the second part.
Okay, sure.
Because we're almost ready, and we're already, but the first part was our 20 minutes, and it's so interesting that I would love to continue with it on the next part. So thank you very much for having you here. And
thank you for having me,
Kevin. What's Kevin?
Declan.
That's sure, Declan. Declan Jones. Hey,
okay.
I'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
This is a listener-supported show. I feel honored if you subscribe this show. You can follow me non-financial with a following click on one of my Instagram accounts, or subscribe the visual version of this podcast on YouTube via the link below. If you like what you hear, be sure to tune in this Sunday for the third part of this ArTEEtude audio triptych. If you want to leave a donation for a coffee or a bus ticket, just follow the donation link via the ArTEEtude podcast account. Eventually, I would like to thank, through this medium, all my members and listeners of the I Love West Cork Artists Network from all over the world. Just to remember myself that without you, this here couldn't and wouldn't happen.
You have listened to ArTEEtude, West Cork's first art, fashion and design podcast. ArTEEtude, never so close again. That was too close.